After the murder of his close friend Welch, Tay's gang became Welch World, and trigger-happy Tay would get out of hospital and onto the warpath with hopes of avenging his fallen brother. He would eventually heal from his shooting, getting out of the hospital and back onto the streets of Chicago in 2010, and he would be seen on his block surrounded by goons who referred to him as a Welch World shooter in this throwback hood vlog.
Man, we gonna hold this bitch down. Shooters right here. Ain't nothing but shooters.
Hey, look. My advice, you man, at the end of the night, try not to get got, man. We out here. We ain't playing with nobody. We're real crazy. I got tatted. We in this bitch. Real crazy. We in this bitch.
You think we playing?
The whole low end, we trying to take over the whole side, man.
All on the rooftop.
Look out for that, man.
Later, in November of 2010, Tay would be back out on the streets, and on the 11th of November, he would be stopped by the police while driving with his friends on the far south side of Chicago. As Tay was asked to get out of the front passenger seat, he would try and flee, and during a scuffle with the police, a handgun would fall from his waist. Tay would continue resisting the arrest, hitting an officer in the eye, but he was eventually taken down. Now, this encounter would actually come up later, once Tay's music career began to blow up, as some Redditors and YouTubers began accusing Tay of snitching, after he had allegedly tried to pin the gun on the driver of the car, saying that the driver of the car had handed the gun to him, with intense debate persisting over whether or not this alleged statement amounted to full-blown snitching. Tay himself would even recall this event during his No Jumper interview, but not mentioning any statements.
What actually went down in the situation where you got caught with it?
So, man, my cousin had called me. You feel me? He like, man, he got into us. So I'm like, all right. They come grab me. Long story short, we go over there, we talk it out, because it was some guys from his block. So they talk it out or whatever, but when we leave, now bro forgot to cut the lights on of the car, so the police pulled us over. So when they pull us over, so I'm telling them like, man, take off, you know, but he didn't really want to take off, but boom. So when they pull us over, they ask for license, all that, so they tell us get out. So they tell us get out. I try to take off, you know what I'm saying? They grab me, slam me, all that. You know, I'm still trying to get away, but it was over with. They locked us up. They locked me up. They looked at my address, but I had like a weird address, so it wasn't even my address. Cause now I'm waiting. Now I'm like, man, what's going on? So, cause usually it'd be like the next day you'll go to the county jail. So now I'm waiting. Oh yeah, the officer raiding your house. I'm raiding my house for what?
While the full facts of this case remain unclear, what it does tell us is that Tay and his friends were riding around Chicago, armed and up to no good. And as 2011 rolled around, Tay would again become entangled with the law, next time much more seriously. In the early morning hours of Saturday the 5th of February 2011, Cess and her sister were out partying with some friends on the south side of Chicago. They had just left a party in the Auburn-Gresham neighborhood and were headed to another party on South Shore. But what they probably didn't know was that Gresham was Tay's old stomping grounds that he still frequented. And according to police paperwork, Tay was allegedly riding around with his friend that night when he spotted Cess in her car and decided to follow her. Cess's group arrived at the location of the second party around 2 AM, and after looking for a parking spot, they eventually parked across the street from Windsor Nursing Home. At around 2:05 AM, Cess got out of the car ahead of her friends as she apparently had to use the restroom. But as she stepped onto the street, Tay allegedly appeared from behind her friends, running in front of her holding a handgun. Before Cess even had time to react to what was happening, Tay allegedly shot her twice, and according to police paperwork, once she was already laying on the ground, Tay would allegedly stand over her, saying, "I told you, bitch," as he shot her several more times, leaving Cess bleeding out on the street as he next aimed the gun towards her sister and friends who were fleeing the scene in the car. Tay then allegedly shot at the car before fleeing himself on foot. Cess's sister and friends, who had fortunately escaped the scene unscathed, circled the block and then returned to help a wounded Cess, who was then taken to hospital by ambulance. But unfortunately, her injuries were devastating, and at 5:15 AM, Cess would be pronounced dead, and her murder would be reported the following day by local news, who notified the public that there had been no arrests made so far. However, what we now know is that since the first incident report, Tay would be named as the main suspect. And in the days to come, following the murder of Cess, the police would seemingly find more information about Tay, making him a wanted man. However, for the time being, the cops seemingly didn't have enough evidence to bring charges, and Tay would remain free. Meanwhile, Cess would be laid to rest, and her friends would be left to grieve, leading them to give their hood a new name, Cess World. As far as police were concerned, Tay Savage was the prime suspect in the murder, and as far as the streets were concerned, Tay Savage had taken the first step towards avenging the murder of his friend Welch, with the fact that Tay was believed to be responsible for this brazen assassination circulating widely, with numerous people mentioning in interviews they believed Tay to be the killer of Cess, the mother of rapper Blazing Doll.
The situation with him allegedly killing Blazing Doll mama, I know he killed that girl mama. He shot at me. It hit different.
Tay's reputation as a trigger-happy bully was already cemented in the streets of Welchworld, but after the murder of Cess, all eyes were on him. However, what would happen months later would end up making Tay Savage one of the most revered gangsters in Chicago history. Just over 2 months after Cess was murdered, on Sunday the 10th of April, at around 4:30 p.m, her friend she was rumored to have killed Welch with, Neif, real name Christopher Daniels, was driving his car on the 7400 block of South Vincennes Avenue when he stopped at a traffic light. While he was stopped, a man would exit another vehicle in front of Neif before beginning to fire into the car. According to reports by Chicago police, the shooter was Tay Savage. Neif would then attempt to escape the situation by putting his car in reverse, but this would cause him to crash into another vehicle. Meanwhile, Tay would allegedly keep shooting into the car, hitting Neif several times, and then fleeing the scene with his getaway driver before the police and paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, Neif was already in serious condition and would be pronounced dead in the hospital soon after. This was the second shooting on the same block within 2 weeks, and one of over a dozen shootings that took place in Chicago over that weekend, leaving some of the locals afraid to leave their homes and fearful of what was to come next, while the police were likely already connecting the dots behind the scenes with regards to the killing of Neif. For the time being, there was once again no arrests, despite the shooting taking place in front of numerous witnesses. But both the driver and the shooter on the hit were both wearing ski masks that covered their faces. Again, members of the AV and other friends of Neif would react to his death on their social media, seemingly unable to believe that Neif had been taken out so soon after the killing of Cess. Known for riding together and now known for dying together, the loss of Cess and Neif so close to each other cemented these two as legends in their hood. And as Neif was laid to rest, the AV adopted the moniker CWNS, meaning Cess World, Neif Streets. Meanwhile, after Neif's death, members of Welchworld were also posting, one of them saying how it was time for them to get off the bench and play ball, with another member who would say that they would foul the whole team, to which another member would reply, "Yep, every last one." This seemed to suggest that Welchworld's hitters weren't even done with their revenge campaign, even after killing 2 prominent hitters from the other side and avenging their friend Welch, who the gang had now been named after. They were keen to keep disrespecting their ops and stoking the beef. However, while Welchworld was feeling boisterous after allegedly taking out the people who had killed their most loved member, their other enemies were also getting active. According to tweets by Welchworld affiliates, about a week after the death of Neif, Tay would be arrested due to being suspected of numerous gun-related incidents, including the murders of Cess and Neif. However, it seemed that the police simply didn't have enough evidence to charge him for those murders at the time, and instead he would be charged with 2 attempted murders in relation to the other incidents, leading him to eventually beating those charges, instead receiving an 18-month sentence for aggravated unlawful use of a weapon. This would take him off the streets right when the war in the low end was getting scorching hot.
I had 2 attempts. I beat them in 2012.
Following Tay's arrest, Welchworld members would post to social media saying free him and paying respects, posting photos of Tay in jail and even creating free Tay shirts. Unfortunately, while Tay was incarcerated, the already hot war in Welchworld would get even hotter and even more complicated, as rivalries with numerous local gangs would intensify and affiliates would soon begin fighting amongst themselves.